How would you feel if you are living in a village of 200 people, but only 5 out of the 200 people had the right to decide how the village should function? Who can live in the village, who should be rewarded in the village, and who should be punished? These 5 people have everything under their control. How would you feel to live in such a village? Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Ummah Matters. My name is Firdaus Khan Angarhari. So towards the end of the last century, in 1997, there was a crisis called the Asian financial crisis. It happened because some countries in Asia had borrowed too much money and its currency lost its value very quickly. This caused big economic problems and a lot of people lost their jobs. After the Asian financial crisis, global finance ministers started yearly meetings to discuss financial stability. And so the G20 was created. Later in 2008, heads of states were also included as a response to the 2008 financial crisis. The G20 is simply the group of 20. Currently, there are 19 countries, the European Union, and recently the African Union has also joined the G20. This group of countries and unions meet yearly to discuss solutions to different issues that they think are important. The G20 members represent more than 85% of global GDP and more than 75% of all global trade. They also represent two-thirds of the world population. This year's G20 summit was held in India. India spent a big budget on the preparations of the meetings, and the meetings were held in different parts of the country. And of course, you could see the photos of Narendra Modi all over the place. It was something political for him. And I will not be surprised if some people start to use this as an achievement of Narendra Modi, because there are elections in India next year. What was also interesting is that two main figures, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, were absent in the meetings. Putin probably for an obvious reason, because there is an ICC arrest warrant against him. He had also skipped the last year's summit. But for the absence of Xi Jinping, there has not been given an official reason, but it could be because of the border tensions with India or something internal. If we look at our world, the world has always been divided. And that is also the case today. Summits like these are a golden opportunity because you have leaders of big, powerful countries coming together. And this can promote peace and cooperation amongst nations. But we cannot neglect that they also lack common ground. If these big, powerful economies can agree on some basic problems that the world is facing, such as poverty, such as climate crisis, such as the threat of nuclear wars, and so on, if the leaders of these countries can agree and make firm pledges to solve these problems, then that is truly a golden opportunity. And that will make events like the G20 very effective. But what I see is that these countries come to represent their own national interests. And that is okay to an extent, but I think they lose the track beyond this. They are too focused on personal agendas, and because of this, the effect or the effectiveness of these summits is very limited. You can understand that no nation will take steps or decisions that will, in their own opinion, harm their national interests. I asked you at the beginning of the video a simple question. How would you feel living in a village of 200 people in which only 5 people had the right to decide on almost every important thing? Now that was an imaginary example, but unfortunately that is the reality when it comes to global politics, when it comes to global governance, when it comes to how our world functions. The problem with such organizations or blocs is that the poor nations, the weak nations, are not fairly represented. If you look at the UN, which is supposed to represent the whole world, but yet you have 5 big countries who have the veto power. Basically that these big countries can take the big decisions or veto them without the approval of the weaker nations. And this is also the case with G20. So you have always with such organizations, the big, the powerful who decide everything, but you have the weaker countries, the weak people, the weaker nations who are not equally represented, who are not fairly represented. And by this, it makes it not such a democratic process. It has a lot of flaws. And that might have been okay post World War II. Now there is serious need for change. The whole world needs to be represented in such organizations. We see more and more that the world is divided amongst big powers. And unfortunately, the Muslim countries are underrepresented and in some cases not represented at all. And that creates a need for a more effective and a more equal union of the Islamic countries. This union of Islamic countries should equally represent the poor countries and the rich countries, and that will make it something very effective. It will have barakah in it, it will have blessings in it. Like, we are a nation who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we believe in justice and equality. If we reach something like that, we can solve most of our own problems, and we can give the world a better example to follow than what is currently out there. Thank you very much for being with me. See you next time.